1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins in a row for the Nashville Predators. What a turnaround for this team after the worst start in 20 years. How have the Preds done it? We'll talk about it today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day every single day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to give a special shout out to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys, and we appreciate the support you give us week in, week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at the Hockey News.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And the Nashville Predators have a 5-game winning streak.
I mean, I'll take things I did not think we'd be talking about a week ago.
Yeah. I guess if things get really tough, just abandon the road trip you're on and mosey on back to the confines of Bridgestone Arena.
Yeah, Andrew Burnett had said one of his goals when, he got here and with this team and early in the season when they had lost a couple of games at Bridgestone, he's like, we have to turn this back into a place that's hard to win. And something's happening at Bridgestone, y'all, because the Nashville Predators have won 5 in a row. Now, one of those they did get on the road, but St. Louis is close enough that maybe the mojo just kind of carried to St. Louis.
It is Tennessee adjacent.
It is Tennessee adjacent.
Yeah, St. Louis is just a worse Memphis. Well, so it's kind of in this home state. With all due respect to some of those other wins, the Colorado one last week was exciting, but last night seemed like maybe the biggest statement of them all. The Nashville Predators taking on the Winnipeg Jets. Weirdly enough, one of the hottest teams in the NHL this year, and who themselves had a 5-game winning streak coming into this game. The Jets kind of embarrassed Nashville earlier this year, so it felt like a lot of, I guess kind of a therapeutic opportunity for Nashville to kind of exercise the demons, and that's exactly what the Nashville Predators did. Went up 3-0 in this game. Yakov Trenin scored right at the end of the first period. Roman Josi, Gustav Nyquist scored in the second period. Things got a little bit dicey midway through the third. Josh Morrissey, and Cole Perfetti scored within a minute of each other to put the Jets back within one. But then the Nashville Predators defense and UC Saros shut the door late in this game. Preds hold on for a 3-2 win. And your one word to describe last night's game.
My one word throws all the way back to high school. And I don't know, Nick, if y'all had to do this in high school. Did you guys have to do the presidential physical fitness test?
I don't think so.
No?
We climbed rope. Does that count?
You climbed a rope. Well,
Is that the same thing?
I don't think we had to do rope climb for it. But when I was in high school, we had the presidential physical fitness test, and you did it every year. And everybody was like, here we go again. And it was this list of things that you had to do. Like you had to do a 1-mile run, and you had to do push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups and sprints and all of these different things. And one of the elements of it was you had to do a wall sit. And this game last night reminded me of the presidential physical fitness test wall sit. Because you knew, like, we have to do it for 1 minute. You had to be able to do it for 1 minute. You can do anything for 1 minute. But you get down there and you think, okay, it's fine. You kind of slide down the wall. Your legs are at 90-degree angles and you just sort of sit there. And you think, okay, this is okay. I can do this for a minute. It's just a minute. But then eventually, like, you start kind of feeling the burn, and the next thing you know, like, your legs are shaking, but you can't really shift. Like, you can't come up out of it, otherwise you have to start again. You can't slide down because otherwise you have to start again. And you just have to kind of hold it. And you got to work through that kind of burn and just get to the end of the 60 seconds. And that was exactly what this game felt like to me. Like, the Nashville Predators came out, they kind of had to settle into their game. I think both teams needed to sort of settle into their games in the first period, got to their game in the second period. That third period, those 2 quick goals, man, legs started shaking, friends. The legs started shaking. But you just hold on and you can get there. You can get through the 60 seconds.
I saw that and I was like, oh, here we go. Namely because I had an article that came out today for Penalty Box Radio, and I had included at that point it was 3-0, and I was just writing based on the assumption the Predators were winning, and then I was like, of course I'm just gonna have to just do the old Control-A delete and start over.
Yes.
At 10:30 at night Eastern time. Yeah, I mean that was a lot to get through, Anne. My one word for last night's game was skirmish. Now, if you're I guess familiar with especially the Civil War, I grew up in Franklin, so I learned about the Battle of Franklin at least 12 times in my school career. There's battles where you're there for just long periods of time, and then there's skirmishes, which are just kind of 2 sets of troops just sort of happen to run into each other. It's like running into your old high school friend at the Kroger right before Thanksgiving. You're not really hanging out, but you're not really not hanging out either. You're just politely saying hi, or in the case of war, maybe just fire a few shots here and there. Not really a long strategic thing. That kind of felt like what this game was last night in terms of the story of the Preds and Jets this season. Because, Anne, this is not the last time they're going to meet this year.
No.
And I also don't think this is the last time we are going to be talking about quote-unquote important games for either team when these two play. We talked about it last year. They battled for the last playoff spot. There's at least some historical precedent that says the Nashville Predators might at least be in the conversation come later this year. I mean, a lot's got to go right, but you saw bits and pieces of sort of this series ramping up. Vlad Nemestikov hitting 15 different people after the whistle, and then turning around and smiling when the players get mad at him. Roman Josi, taking a lot of abuse, finally starting to snap at the end and start throwing cross checks at people. That was a big thing. You saw, Brassard get bumped a couple times. You saw Saros get bumped a couple of times. Jeremy Lauzon and Michael McCarron giving sort of warning looks to the bench. Adam Lowry giving some warning looks to the Predators bench. It just feels like this was the one little skirmish that is going to ramp up the war between these two teams later in the season. And that's what this felt like. This felt like the prelude to, okay, this is going to be a battle throughout the year with these two teams, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a low simmering thing happening. You watched it, that first game, the Predators didn't have their best game. Winnipeg clearly dominated in that game. This game, I think you saw some frustration, like you said, Roman Josi taking a couple of extra hits. At some point, that very nice, soft-spoken Swiss man is going to snap, So I do think we're building to something with these two teams this season.
Yeah, it seems like there's got to be a lot more between these two, and we are just getting started with these two teams. And we're just getting started in the breakdown of last night's game. We'll get into that in just a second. Also talk about what has gone right for the Nashville Predators during this 5-game win streak that maybe wasn't going right at the beginning of the season. First, though, want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Collective. They say if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. But as a freelancer, take it from us, there's always the dreaded paperwork that comes with it. These taxes are not necessarily the most fun thing to do when you're a creative hockey content creator. But with Collective, the good news is you can focus on your business of one while letting Collective focus on all your paperwork. Collective is the #1 financial solution for freelancers, contractors, and self-employed entrepreneurs that lets you focus on your passion and not all that heavy paperwork behind the scenes. So Collective handles all that stuff you dread: corporate formation, compliance letters, taxes, bookkeeping, accounting, payroll, and the best part, it's at the fraction of the cost of a traditional CPA. Collective knows that if your business makes over $80,000 a year, you'll find the most value from their services, and you can join the thousands of solo entrepreneurs who have saved an average of $10,000 per year on taxes with their structure. Right now, Collective is offering a 1 month free and no onboarding fee when you go to collective.com/LockedOnNHL and tell them Locked On NHL sent you. That's a $550 value for free when you go to collective.com/LockedOnNHL and tell them Locked On NHL sent you. All right, Ann, we are talking about the Predators' 3-2 win over the Winnipeg Jets, the 5th win in a row for the Nashville Predators. And what stood out to you in last night's game?
Gosh, there was a lot that stood out to me. I think the biggest takeaway that I had, kind of watching the game as a whole and thinking back on the game, was that Nashville managed the game, I think, better than we've seen them manage some other games, especially with those quick 2 goals, because, you're up a 3-goal lead. Now, UC Soros said after the game, like, anymore in the NHL, a 3-goal lead's not nothing. It just doesn't mean what it used to mean in the NHL. But, you're up 3 goals, and then literally less than a minute, you have a 1-goal lead all of a sudden, and you still have half a period to get through.
Yeah.
And I feel like those were the moments that really threw the Nashville Predators in some of their previous games. Those switches, those quick, oh my gosh, things aren't going the same way, was what threw the Predators when they kind of struggled earlier in the season. So for me, I think my biggest takeaway was just watching the team kind of regroup. And in the post-game pressers and stuff, they kind of talked about, on the bench, what was said was, look, we still have a 1-goal lead. You still play the same game. We are still up. Because I think collectively, everybody at Bridgestone Arena and everybody watching, as a Nashville Predators fan, was going, oh crap. We felt so good about this game, and then, oh crap, this could actually happen. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway was that feels like a maturing point for the Nashville Predators, because that really tested their ability to stick to what they do and to stick to what Andrew Brunette wants them to do. For me, that was huge in this game. And I think it's kind of a big part of what's happening with the team as well.
And it's not just at the end of the game either. When you talk about kind of bouncing back when things don't go right, it's not just them, giving up those 2 goals and doing that. They started this game not very well.
Not very good.
Edmonton came out of the gates, hard, and the Predators were not playing great hockey to start the game. They rebounded from that in the period.
Yeah.
They were, I think Edmonton was out shooting them, or, Winnipeg, was out shooting them I think 15-4 at one point. It was something like that, maybe 14-4. And the Nashville Predators had 8 of the final 9 shots of the period. And then you had the Yakov Trenin goal. So they rebounded early in the period. And that I think is also maturity, because, you always hear it's let's just get to intermission and then regroup and say some things around. You're seeing them regroup in the middle of the game, them being huge. They're being able to kind of look at it and realize, okay, we're kind of getting our butts kicked right now. Let's turn this around now. Let's not just try to limp into the period, end of the period and just sort of salvage this. Let's go out and actually change the play right now. Let's start doing something different. Let's hone in. And I think that in itself is maybe a bigger sign of maturity for a team like the Predators too, because you have the maturity, you have sort of the wherewithal to realize, okay, things aren't going well. We need to buckle down now and just stick to the game plan, and then we'll be able to turn some things around here.
Yeah, I agree. Game management is definitely improving. Also, Roman Yossi had a great game last
Yeah.
night. We've talked about Roman Yossi maybe not having the points that we're used to seeing Roman Yossi have, not necessarily being the offensive, leader of this team. And he's kind of taken on a different role with the way that this system operates under Andrew Brunette. But Roman Yossi had a goal and then had assists on the other two goals. And that's like, I think there was a stat, he is like the third or fourth most times a defenseman in NHL history has contributed to 3 or more goals during his team's game. Erik Karlsson is first. There's another guy who's no longer playing the second, and then Roman Yossi. So like you're seeing some of that Roman Yossi where he's coming back and he's taking over games. He's coming back and he's making these kind of game pivoting plays that maybe at the beginning of the season we didn't see quite as much from him, as everybody sort of settled in. And the defense has been through some things, y'all. There have been a lot of changes on the defense. So for me, I think Roman Yossi's game was huge for this team. Not just in the points, but I also think kind of him feeling comfortable, Ryan O'Reilly feeling comfortable. Clearly, Philip Forsberg is extremely comfortable in his hockey skin right now, and I think those veterans feeling more comfortable with what the expectation is, with how to manage the game in a new way. I think that's making a big difference for this team as well.
Yeah. Defensively, I thought yesterday was one of Roman Yossi's best defensive games of this season. Speaking of defense, we mentioned some changes real quick. Luke Schenn back in the lineup last night. How would you rate his game, what you saw from him?
It was okay. It was okay. It was just okay for me. I think, it was a good first step back. It was an interesting move to go 7 defensemen, 11 forwards, I thought. Andrew Brunette talked after the game that kind of the point of doing that was to ease him in, because Schenn really hasn't, it's not like he's had a bunch of full practices. He's been out on the ice a couple of times for practices and then participated yesterday morning in the morning skate. So it was almost more of an opportunity to sort of get him out there, get him up to game speed and see where he was at.
Yeah.
He's been out 7 weeks.
Yeah.
So, he's been out 7 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, it's didn't have an impact. Let's say that. Not in a bad way, not in a good way either. Just didn't have an impact. Let's talk a little bit real quick about that 11 forward 7D. I didn't hate it.
I didn't hate it either.
Because here's the thing. You want to get Luke Schenn back in the lineup, and he's got value as a penalty killer. He's got, he's good in certain situations, I think, on teams. I mean, you saw Vancouver, you saw Toronto, and you saw Tampa Bay over the years being able to kind of zone in on what he does well. So he's definitely an asset you can have on your team. And then up front, you're battling injuries. You haven't, brought anybody back up since Tommy Novak and Cody Glass went down again. You have somebody like Liam Foudy who hasn't had a big impact.
Mm-hmm.
So why not, and the flip side, other people on defense have, like Spencer Stastny has been playing well. The rest of the defense has been playing well. Dante Fabro has been playing really well, and he's been healthy scratch for 3 games.
Right.
So why not just say, okay, we're going to try something different up front. We've been shuffling lines anyway. Let's go 7D and just kind of see if we can rotate our 20 best players in and out. I guess 19, because Lankinen's one of them. Yeah. But let's just kind of rotate our best players based on the situation and see what we get. And I didn't hate that, Ann.
I didn't hate it either. And I really think you hit the nail on the head for why it wasn't as big a deal as it looked like it could have been when we saw the lineup announced. And I think it's because they really haven't necessarily nailed down the perfect forward line combinations yet. So it's not like you're disrupting something that's cooking. And not to take anything away from Liam Foudy, but they've kind of changed things in and out. You've had, Tomasino in and out of that bottom 6, and you haven't nailed down what that successful lineup looks like. So it didn't really cost you chemistry. It didn't cost you anything on a line. And, you can slot Cole Smith in here or there, or Yakov Trenin can jump up here or there, or Colton Sissons. Like, you've got guys in those bottom six that can kind of rotate through. So it didn't cost you anything. I think seeing it on paper ahead of the game made everybody go, what?
Yeah.
But I think seeing how it was executed, and that it really wasn't disruptive to the forward lines necessarily. Why not? Why not get a look? You've got to get a look at these defensemen, because at some point, Andrew Brunette's going to have to make some pretty difficult decisions when it comes to the blue line. So, go for it.
Yeah, it's something that might be coming sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
As well. So Preds have won 5 straight.
Come on.
They did not win 5 straight to start the year.
Nope.
In fact, it was their worst start in franchise history since 2003. So what has changed for the Nashville Predators all of a sudden? Andrew Brunette has some insight, and we have some guesses as well. We'll get to that in 1 second.
First, want to let you know this episode is brought to you by our great friends at the Sleeper app. Look, this NHL season, we are 20 games in, and there are now all sorts of possibilities. Philip Forsberg could score 50 goals. The Preds could work their way back up into a wild card position for the playoffs. And friends, you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you could win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. It is easy and it is fun. All you have to do is pick whether players will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, power play points, saves, plus minus, even more in any given game. For instance, if you download the Sleeper app and look at tonight's choices, you'll have to pick. Will Jack Eichel have more or less than 3.5 shots on goal? Will Boone Jenner have more or less than 0.5 power play points? Will our dear old friend Tanner Jeannot have more or less than 0.5 goals in the games tonight? To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Preds fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. So go and download the Sleeper app. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availabilities.
All right. So the Nashville Predators, Ann, have 5 straight wins.
Come on.
Thanks to last night's 3-2 win over the Winnipeg Jets. Some interesting insight as to what has gone right for the Nashville Predators after so much went wrong to start the year.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that are slowly coming together. But for me, I think the biggest thing is time. We saw a lot of potential from the Predators in the first couple of games, but one of the things I think the team struggled with is that it's very difficult to rebuild kind of muscle memory and muscle memory under pressure. And it was frustrating to see the team kind of make some progress and then take some steps back. We watched them get so close in some of their games and then just come up with losses. And I wonder if some of it's not just time, Nick. Like, get used to the fact that when you're under pressure, your default becomes what Andrew Brunette wants. Not what you did under John Hines or Peter Laviolette, but your default stays within the system, this new system. And I think maybe we underestimated how long it would take for the Predators to really get comfortable understanding in those split-second moments of the game what it was that they needed to do to stay with the game plan that Andrew Brunette had. So for me, I think time has been huge for the Predators. And I'm not saying they've got it all locked down and nailed down, and Andrew Brunette would say the same thing, I think.
Yeah.
But time makes a big difference. I think they're feeling more comfortable not having to think.
Yeah. You said time. I say kind of consistency
Yeah.
as well. And it's almost like, like manifestation where it's like, if you see something, if you like really believe in it, if you like think about it and manifest it, it'll come true. I feel like there's maybe like a little extent of that as well, because how many times did we talk about earlier this year, the Preds doing a lot of the right things?
Yes.
They were playing the right way. They were playing like, sustainable hockey. They just weren't getting wins out of it. And I think based on that, its ability to panic and it's like, okay, well, we need to go back to doing this, or we need to start forcing things, or we need to X this up a little bit. And credit to Andrew Burnett for kind of saying, he said it in a lot of media interviews, but I'm sure he said it in the locker room. Well, it's like, look, we got to just kind of keep doing the right things. And he felt like that was a big issue when the Predators started to slide, was that the Preds would kind of abandon the game plan when adversity happened, when they went down in games, when they weren't winning. And I think they just needed a few games in a row of actually seeing what happens when you do sort of stick with things. When you play the right way and wind up getting rewarded with like a 4-1, 4-2 win, as opposed to Arizona, where you outshoot them by 20 shots and lose 7-5. Kind of seeing that Colorado game. Look, you're down late, but let's not panic. Let's do what you've been doing all game. Focus on the positive things. And boom, voila, look, you came back and won. Did the same thing against St. Louis. Look, we absolutely clobbered a team because we just kind of played the same way consistently throughout the game. And then you beat arguably one of the hottest teams in the Western Conference last night, playing that same thing. Even when you went down, or even when you gave up those 2 goals, you maintained your game plan and you paid off with a win. And I think the Predators, especially the younger players, are now finally starting to see what Andrew Burnett has been preaching, starting to pay off. And I think that's big for a young team like this.
And I think it's that you're seeing the same thing with individuals as well. The whole team is kind of learning that, but I think with individuals and their performances, you're seeing that. We've talked a long time about Philip Forsberg doing all the right things, wasn't getting goals. Stick to what you're doing and the goals will come. Yakov Trenin had another goal last night, and we got a chance to talk to him and said, are you doing anything differently than you were earlier in the season when you were getting opportunities and not finding the back of the net? And he said, I'm not doing anything different. You just got to stick to it and trust the process. And that's a tough lesson to learn, especially with a new head coach. You've got a lot of young players that want to make an impression. And I think it worked really well individually and as a team to kind of learn this early in the season. It came at a great time. A lot of Central Division points here.
Yeah. And, we're starting to rack up points a little bit. And the Preds are 1 point out of a playoff spot. And I know what you're thinking. Why are we talking about playoffs in November? The Christmas tree's not even up in my living room. There's 5 months left. Don't give me that look.
I've got 4 up already. What are you doing?
I take my time.
Okay.
There's 5 months left in the season. But weirdly enough, Anne, history has shown us that this time of year has kind of been a critical junction. As pointed out in the article that I wrote today for Penalty Box Radio, 70% or 77% of the teams that have a playoff spot on Thanksgiving wind up making the playoffs that year. And teams who are, it wound up being like 8 points outside of a playoff spot on Thanksgiving. No team outside of 8 points has ever made it. And it's like kind of like the percentage goes up as the season goes on. So the Predators being where they are right now, as you would say, Ann Campbell, that's not nothing.
That's not nothing. No, this is a really good time for the Predators to get comfortable in their game. Like we said, this is 20 games in tells you something. It doesn't tell you everything, but it sure does tell you something, and it predicts something. And also this stretch with the Central Division rivals has been huge for the Predators. In December, they only face 2 Central Division teams. So if you're going to be on a win streak, that's a grand time, y'all. Now's a grand time.
Yeah, not bad. This is Monday, which is normally when we do plus minus. So we are going to do some plus minus tomorrow. There's been a lot of positive things for the Nashville Predators that we want to highlight. So we will get to that tomorrow on the Locked On Predators podcast. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at penaltyboxradio.com. Follow me on social media at _NS Morgan. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back with an all new episode tomorrow. We'll see you then.